Hello, and welcome to Inside Music Curation. We are here today to talk about black metal in pop culture. Who would have thought, right? Well, at Feed Media Group, these lovely folks that I have here with me today are part of our amazing music curation team, and they help curate and empower music for brands, right? We work with fitness, wellness, we run the gamut. And so a lot of the music that we're working with does fall into the pop category. And as we explore genres and we explore trends, we come across little nuggets once in a while. And Juan has uncovered a trend, if you will, of black metal finding its way into pop culture. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to dive in like we do inside music curation style. I'm going to start by asking Juan to help us out for anyone that's not familiar. What is black metal specifically?
So, black metal is a style of metal that essentially is what makes it different is the way the song is conceptualized and also the beat of the actual song. That's what makes it different musically. Along with that, there's also kind of a context lyrically and more or less like fundamentally like what their messaging is. That is the other aspect, and combined you have black metal. So the history of it is it kind of was developed in the early 80s, really getting its more definitional like term in 85 with Venom. But even then it wasn't actually crystallized. It wasn't something that was necessarily a genre more than it was just like these data points, right? That people were like, oh, well, I like this, so I can like that, and I could like this. Wasn't necessarily a genre. And then around 85, 86, Norwegian bands started picking up some of this sound and then developing it into what is now considered black metal, which has its, it has its sound and again, like its own personality, very much like people would say like punk has its own personality or, hip hop has its own personality.
So it has some of the roots in Norway, and it had a bit of a controversial start, right? Like it had a little bit of a rocky history.
Yeah. So the history of black metal is very controversial. There's a film. They made a film about it, which is incredible. I would have never thought they would make a film out of it, but when you see it on film, you're like, wow, this actually is a very wildly entertaining story to a degree. So black metal started, or I'm sorry, Norwegian black metal, what they've implemented into the black metal style was they were able to give it some type of personality, right? And that personality was based on the fact that these were teenagers during the Satanic Panic that felt like they were being marginalized for their beliefs in paganism and other kind of more extreme ideologies. And what they did was they formed a style of music that connects with its listeners based on kind of topics of everything from survivalism to isolationism. It is a song necessary. Well, it's a music of almost like, it's called warrior music, right? It's the armor that you put on, even though you might not be that person. It's the type of armor that you put on in order to present yourself as like the hero, right? This is a great example. So Chelsea Wolfe is a indie rock artist signed to Sargent House, and her whole aesthetic has roots in black metal. And what I find fascinating as far as how this ties in with black metal is that she's utilizing black metal in the sense of like what it looks like, right? Like, yeah, the music to some degree lyrically has some tie to it. And, you know, she does add implementations of like, you know, etherealness that give you kind of like dog whistle cues to black metal. But when you're looking at this picture, you're like, wow, you know, this is pretty black metal. But the reason why she's using this is for empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this, a lot of the controversies with black metal was that a lot of these kids were looking to be empowered in the wrong way. And even though they created this kind of style that did empower those kind of negative and or like, you know, untraditional views, it allows for them, you know, to still communicate, right? And so what's interesting is the lexicon of how something so horrifically controversial can then transcend through time to give people an opportunity to show strength. Which is, you know, obviously, as many people would know, it probably a lot of mental gymnastics, right? But at the same time, it really has to do with the foundational elements of what black metal was made for. And it was warrior music that was for people that felt disenfranchised, whether that be controversial or not. And to see it in popular culture today, and to see who's actually taking that. Like, for example, yeah, this picture here with Phoebe Bridgers, this whole black and white, gothy, almost like not violent necessary, but very moody, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
a big thing that comes from the black metal community.
You know what I was going to say, Juan?
Yes.
I think a very important element that you just said, and I think for a lot of people who are not familiar with death metal, you know, people probably think that death metal is just like this, this type of music that it's loud and it's fast and it's like all screams. But there's a lot of black metal that includes, you know, like as you were saying, you know, it's this atmosphere, right? There's like black metal that uses music that it's very ambient, right? Not just or even, you know, like those sounds with just like, you know, heavy guitars, they also create this ambient sound, right? And I feel that, you know, this pop artists, they're not only taking, you know, from the aesthetics, and they might be taking also from what you're saying, you know, the empowerment in this case, you know, the warrior posture, and the way that, you know, the movement started, you know, like wrongly, but, you know, how the movement has been transcending right now. But I think, you know, they're also very, in a way that people probably don't realize, they are including, you know, elements of, you know, very subtle, you know, that sometimes, you know, a song doesn't have to be in like all like screaming guitars, you know, to be a super rock and roll song. Yeah. It could be an acoustic song, you know, sung by super sweet voice, and it could be the most rock and roll thing. I think, you know, there's also that aspect, you know, of black metal that like, that, you know, just for the general audience, I wanted to make that comment.
That's my favorite thing about, you know, pop music, and in that sense is it gets to take, you know, niche subcultures and bring them into the mainstream in certain, often more palatable ways for wider audiences. So I think this is, such a like a cool example to be bringing up of like, especially from a visual representation of music and what that's, you know, saying about the influences of those artists, or of their producers that they're working with, paints a really unique picture where like you're not in the know until you see stuff like this. And I was definitely one of those people until Juan brought it up of like, oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know that this was anything, or like there was a specific movement even within music to point back to, not just an artistic style.
Yeah. And it's not meant, it's funny because at some point, like you're like, wait, what is this? Did I get got? You know, but it's one of those things where it's just like, it's an emerging culture, right? And I think what's interesting and what Arturo kind of pointed to is that it's more sophisticated. One of the reasons of this being is that black metal was able to essentially morph, or not morph, that's the wrong way, but like basically implement classical elements into their music, right? And so what that did was it created more melody, something more for the ear to catch. And what I thought was actually exceptionally funny was when we were talking about Sweden in our call earlier this week, Claire had mentioned ABBA. ABBA being one of the most melodic pop bands, exceptional pop bands of all time. And it's got me thinking, right? I'm like, wow, what's up with Sweden and the melody, right?
Yeah,
Because
something in the water.
Here you got these black metal people that are utilizing melody in a way that metal wasn't utilizing. You know, it created a place where now you could have long form metal music, you know, whereas before, you know, it was all about chunkiness, fastness. It was all athletic. Now we're starting to enter that more critical, more analytical space in the metal community, which I think lends itself to why it kind of has become more pop.
Yeah, that tracks in terms of what I know, even just about the general Swedish influence on pop music, and you know, all these producers and groups, especially like Max Martin, who like has worked with Taylor Swift, and so arguably has shaped the biggest sounds in pop music over the last 20 years or so. And so yeah, it's definitely interesting that that would come from the same place as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the some of the notable artists and albums to get a little bit more groundwork here on what we're hearing and what might be finding its way into the pop world.
So literally, these are like, this is the gateway.
I was gonna say you should all go and listen to those 4 albums. They're all incredible.
This is the gateway. Like, if you've never heard black metal before, it will be equally interesting and scary all at the same time. If you've listened to black metal before and you're just looking to hear where it actually came from, this is a great 4 album list to go through. So Darkthrone is actually the only intact band out of this entire list. Both members, Friniz and I forget his last name. All tough names. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, Darkthrone. But you know, they are still writing music, and they were pretty foundational when it came to the beginning of it, because they were the ones that really took the Mayhem sound and then like essentially made it more into an actual genre. Mayhem, those are the pioneers. Those are the guys that legitimately came up with the sound, with the vibe, with basically the whole shtick. And they're also one of the most controversial bands of all time. There is a movie out there. I think Rory Culkin is in it. So one of the Culkins.
And I was going to mention one quick thing in relations to Mayhem. They're playing one of the biggest festivals in LA. Well, I mean, it's a festival that originated, but this is what's interesting. It started as a kind of like a hipster festival in Barcelona, Primavera Sound. And now they have versions, you know, across Latin America in different big cities. And they have one in LA as well. I think it's in November. And the lineup, it's crazy. It goes from hip hop, reggaeton, punk rock to Mayhem. Mayhem is playing in that festival. I was like, it is incredible that, you know, he's playing with Paloma Mami, you know, who's like a reggaetonera. It's very interesting, you know, that a band like that has been put in a lineup for a festival of that type.
So unfortunately, Arturo, that fest already happened.
Already happened?
Yeah,
Oh,
it already happened in September.
that's
But
true.
here's
You're
the
right.
thing. Mayhem played at 12 noon, which, by the way, I don't suggest that for black metal bands. They sweat up there. It's LA, and they're sweating. Okay, anyways. But aside from that, to have them on that fest, you're 100% right, Arturo. Like, when was there ever a time, like when I was coming up going to black metal shows, there was never a time that I would go and see a black metal band and then also see someone like Paloma Mami in the same breath. So that definitely shows a little bit of how far it's gotten.
Yeah, I think you put this slide together about some of the reasons why it's becoming relevant or what makes it relevant, at this time. And I think this is really interesting, talking about the empowerment, right? Talking about cultures, talking about, all of these different topics that are coming out and people needing outlets and finding that through metal or through black metal is really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Arturo.
no, I was gonna ask you, you know, in your, because I mean, obviously we're interviewing you, Juan. uh, what would be for you, in which way, like black metal from when it started and today, how does that redefine itself, the genre? I mean, are there maybe like subgenres already within, like black metal, maybe like
Oh
synth
yeah,
or ambient, right? Like,
absolutely. Black metal has become something that is an umbrella, right? And in fact, I would say an umbrella onto the metal category, only for the fact that black metal, being that it's not just sonic anymore, and that there is an implementation of like the evil and the darkness and what that means, right? Whether it be the ambiance, whether it be the lyrics, whether it be the way that they display the art, as far as like graphically or what do you call it? Conceptually, right? Um, so the trend that I'm seeing is not like there's two, right? There's the one that is forward, where it's more of the metal community, right? And the metal community that is more popular leaning, right? And you're seeing a lot of women, POCs, a lot of people that are looking for something shocking to show people, hey, I'm here, right? And then on the other end, right, where it's like more of the pop leading stuff, right? You're seeing that same thing, but there's also kind of like this other aspect of, kind of like more of the shock value, right? But, and I'm sorry if I lost my point there for a second. I'm sorry about that. But I think what makes black metal relevant right now is the fact that people are just looking to communicate in whatever way they can. And for this specific style of music, because it's so shocking, because it's so controversial, it's a lightning rod to so many issues. And I think that's what makes it truly relevant today.
I think for media in general, you get a lot of people who turn to it for escapism, and a lot of people who turn to it for like a hyper realism. And to me, from what like you've been describing and the discussions we've had, the emphasis on contemporary issues and not. No, I mean, I think especially in a post-ish pandemic world of like, really being able to quote unquote like face the music about what is going on, that probably strikes a chord as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about black metal is that it's not pop, okay? In the sense that it's giving you that happy time. It's necessarily not. I mean, depending on how you listen or how you interpret things, but it's more reflective, and that is something that in music could be very enriching, to be able to reflect, to be able to hear something tough and then to have that go through your filter and to be able to come out with something at the end of it that's beneficial to your life. It's another way of looking at the Rubik's Cube.
Well, and I think, some of the people that have come up in this conversation, as far as people that have either been influenced or showing some sort of influence from black metal, right? Like Phoebe Bridgers keeps coming up. She's a huge metal fan, and, she was quoted in an article recently saying, she loves Metallica. To her, they are a pop band, right? Mm-hmm. And she's also one of these artists, kind of leaning into some of these black metal references throughout, kind of at least through some of the imagery that she uses, right? Even if her music does not at all resemble black metal, it's one of the ways where we see that influence coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fun about this whole thing, right, is that once something is put into popular culture, everything starts to get kind of analyzed through that filter, right? So you have Phoebe Bridgers, and she's doing this stuff, and you have Chelsea Wolfe, and she's doing this stuff, and then you have Taylor Swift, and she puts out a record, and granted, she's gone on record. We all know it is not a black metal record. But the funny thing about it is,
but it's called folklore.
Yeah.
That's a black metal reference.
But it got me thinking, right, about popular culture and how end users interact with popular culture. Now, one thing that I didn't write in this, or something that I didn't present in this presentation was the fact that the internet, meme culture, the making of paraphernalia. Not paraphernalia. Merchandise. Like the Taylor Swift black metal one. Like, yes, it's not an official merchandise, but to think that someone had the idea to make that, and now they're making a profit off of that. Mm-hmm. So, what's interesting is what gets perceived to being in the lexicon of black metal, and the fact that there are articles written about Taylor Swift possibly dropping a black metal album, that to me says, wow, black metal has traveled pretty far to the point where we're saying that, Taylor Swift might have put out a black metal record,
I remember even seeing interviewing the guy from Isan, yeah. Isan being interviewed and be like, I don't know, but definitely looks black metal. I don't know if she's gonna do that. But yeah. Well, this is interesting.
But Isan's not wrong, and the thing is that all of influences musically are all nebulous, right? Sometimes an inspiration is just something that you pick out of the air. Mm-hmm. And that thing that you pick out of the air, like that very cool, solemn, synth sound that you think you heard, probably is something that was something straight out of a dungeon synth black metal song, or maybe that gentle chord of some type of folk black metal type thing, and it inspires you to make a country black metal album. What does that mean, right? Is it black metal? Sonically, no, but is it black metal? Yeah, it's just as weird as how folk punk, people are like, what is this guy doing? He's screaming and he's playing folk, and it's that's folk punk. It's interesting, it's wild, but it's still what it is. And so,
yeah, even something like the emo rap,
yes,
and is kind of, even from just a cultural standpoint, became this thing of okay, you've taken hip hop, historically dominated more by African American artists, and the emo rock being a very white normal band, or normally banned sound, and merging those two together as well. So there's lots of, I think, funny crossovers that happen that way too.
Yeah, these are great examples, by the way. Denzel Curry using Black Corpse, and well, definitely Chelsea Wolf. It's really cool to see these references.
So Denzel Curry has a song called Black Metal Terrorist. And so what he does, he kind of flips it right into kind of like I am black and like they're thinking I'm a terrorist, but the implementation of that, right, was like so smart. I'm there as a fan of black metal going like, this is cool, and I think that that's also one of the cool things about this whole like interaction, right, is that it gives not only the fan of a regular Denzel Curry fan something to chew on, it gives me something to chew on. It gives anyone else who's like, into black metal and or gets inspired by that sound. Another one is Ghostman. I know that Ghostman may not be as popular right now, but Ghostman is basically like the answer to Marilyn Manson for 2022. If Marilyn Manson also rapped like the guys from Bone Thugs and Harmony. But that being said, like, I've been to at least 4 or 5 shows here in Los Angeles for Ghostman at the Shrine, Palladium. Like, this guy is someone who maybe not right now is in that pop lexicon, but give it 2-3 years. This guy is going to be huge in that active rock, hip hop, pop area. And yeah, like, I mean, 100% influenced by black metal, lyrically and even tonally. So again, very interesting how all that is emerging, and to say that it's emerging right now, like, no, it's been emerging for the last 3-4 years, but the fact that it's emerging at all, incredible.
The fact that we're having these conversations, the fact that you're seeing, Beyonce using metal typography, like it's finding its way, it's seeping in. And I think it's interesting to see, what is like truly influenced, by like the sounds, what is influenced by the visuals, whether it's the artist themselves, the performing artist, or whether it's somebody on their team, that's creating merch for them or creating album covers. It's there are so many different avenues where influences can seep into current music and into pop music that it's really interesting to have this conversation specifically around black metal.
Really cool, Juan.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise and letting us dive in with you.
Oh, thank you. And I feel it's appropriate, spooky season.
Yeah.
Give you some ideas. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in. This is Inside Music Curation. We probably won't be talking about black metal next week, but you never know what you might hear. We talk about all sorts of genres, influences in music, and a lot about how, businesses utilize music, because that's what we're doing day in, day out. To learn more, we're at feedmediagroup.com. You can learn more about curating music for businesses and all things music curation. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Juan, for bringing your expertise, and Arturo and Claire for keeping the conversation going.
All right, guys. Later.
Bye.